The Bandsaw Life is proudly sponsored by Powermatic, Carter Products, and Typebond, the pro's advantage. Hey everyone, Alex here. Welcome to Bandsaw Live. It doesn't happen very often that I get Chuck Bender in my shop, and I thought, man, we've got to do something live. So we've got Chuck here, and he actually said, hey, I bet you I can get you to cut some dovetails by hand. Well, I took it as a challenge, and you can see my first set. Not too bad. I was amazed at how easy it was, but that's because I had great instruction, and Chuck is the master. So if you'd like to learn how to do this, we're going to actually go through this, show you how to hand cut some dovetails. I'm going to get some close-ups of him so that you can see. I mean, he really explains it so well. I'm going to try to get Chuck down here to teach this, and we were thinking maybe we could do a class of hand-cut dovetails with Chuck and bandsaw cut dovetails with me. So you'll follow along. I think you'll find this very interesting, and I found it was fairly easy to do. Maybe not perfect for my first try, but pretty easy to do. Chuck?
You did pretty good though. I mean, that's a really, I mean, they hold together, only a couple of small gaps, a little more, like 10, 20 years worth of practice, he'll be perfect.
All right, I'm going to let Chuck take it away here.
All right.
We'll see what happens. And I'm going to learn again because I was impressed with so much knowledge in such a short period of time. All right, go ahead, Chuck.
All right, so we're going to cut some through dovetails, which means that we want this board to pass all the way through this one and be flush on the outside, and we want this board to pass all the way through that board and be flush on the outside, hence the term through dovetails. So in order to do that, what we need to do is create a baseline from which to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my marking gauge, and I'm going to set it so that it's just a few thousandths thicker or farther out. The cutter on my marking gauge is going to protrude beyond the face of the board by a few thousandths of an inch. The reason I'm doing that is I want to, when I assemble the joint, I want the ends of the pins and tails to stick out from the surface of the box or the boards, because it's easier to plane those down to the whole surface of the box than it is if they end up shallow in the joint, and now I have to plane down the whole side of the board.
So tell that marker is pretty unique. This is
it's a carbide wheel. This is made by Lee Valley. It's a Veritas tool. It's their standard marking gauge. There's no fine adjustment or anything. That's just the one that I prefer, but they do make one with a micro adjust and all that kind of stuff. Makes it nice for this kind of stuff because you can really dial in that cut. The great thing about this is when I would do dovetail demos at woodworking shows, I would try and pull somebody out of the crowd. All the adults would try and make themselves real small because nobody really wanted to do it. And I would end up pulling the kid out of the crowd, and invariably the kid would grab this marking gauge just like this, put it right up against the end of that board and scrub, and what they get is an absolutely perfectly straight, deep scribe line, which is what I'm looking for when I do my through dovetails. So I've scribed one face of my board, I'm going to scribe the other, and now the mating piece will get scribed inside and out. I tend not to scribe the edges of my board. Some people go across the edges. The thinner the material here is, the harder it is to keep the marking gauge tight to the end of the board, so you can actually scribe it out of square. So now that I've got the inside and outside done, we're going to talk real quick about, there are two parts to every dovetail, the pins and the tails. How you tell them apart is based on where the angle is on the board, right? So every board has three surfaces, a face, an edge, and an end. Because you guys are all woodworkers, it has two of each one of those. So here's the other face, the other edge, and the other end, okay? So if the angle is on the end of the board, these are the pins, right? And if the angle is on the face of the board, they're the tails. So I like to cut my pins first. A lot of people like to cut their tails first. It's one of the oldest arguments in woodworking is which do you cut first? And the answer is it really doesn't matter. Whatever you like to cut first becomes the pattern for the second half. So I'm going to start. I put the outside of the board facing me.
I'm gonna move the camera over here.
All right.
So that you can see this a little bit better.
So I've got that outside face of the board in the vise. The vise is, I've got the board standing up on end. I pick the angle that I like for my dovetails, and really you can pick just about any angle you like. The closer to 90 degrees you go, the more you're relying on the glue to hold the joint together. The more you go over towards 45, what's going to happen is you're creating all of these shorts of fibers here. So the closer you get over to 45 degrees, the less hold the joint is going to have, and it's going to be more end grain in the middle of it.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is pick an angle that I kind of like. I kind of like that. Well, let's go. That's a little better.
Okay.
All right. And I'm going to start by putting a half pin on the one side of my board, flip it over, do a half pin, and let's do 3. So you can see I'm spending an awful lot of time making sure this is absolutely accurately, evenly divided up. I hope the sarcasm came through there.
Absolutely.
So that's my 3 sections of waste. If I take my square and square those lines down, now when I go to saw my pins, it's as easy as following the lines. Right? So again, waste, waste, waste. And what I want to do, typically I do this I saw on the waste side of the line. It really, at this point it doesn't matter because this is the pattern that I'm making that we're going to make the other part from. I use a Western back saw. It cuts on the push stroke, which is why I'm working from the outside in. This way when I saw these pins, any tear out is on the inside of my joint and it's hidden. Proper grip, 3 fingers through the tote, index finger alongside the back, light grip on there. All I want to do is set it down right on my line. Don't press down, don't push, just rub the saw back and forth. I use my thumb as a guide and I start sawing. If you start sawing and it hurts, stop because you've sawn into your thumb. And all I need to do is let the weight of the saw work its way down through the material. Right? The saw will cut no matter what, unless I really grip it tight. And then you can see now I'm starting to bind up. Right? So loosen up my grip, saw, and follow the lines. Right? Easy stuff. Let's come over to the other side. What the index finger is doing, putting that alongside the back, is it's helped lining up the back of the saw on my forearm in a straight line. If I twist my wrist, my tendency is to start to twist as I push the saw through, and it binds. So keep everything in line. Nice even strokes. Just follow the line. All right. And you can see that little bit of tear out from that push saw is inside my joint where it's going to disappear. So I'm going to take that material, clamp it down with that inside up to my bench. And what I really like about those wheel marking gauges, as I showed you before, they leave a nice, clean, deep score line. Most people that teach you how to cut dovetails have you step your chisel away. We're going to chop that waste out. We're going to go halfway from one side, flip it over, and come in halfway from the other. So most people that teach this tell you to step a little bit away from the line, and that way when you drive the chisel down, that bevel acts as a wedge and it drives it back to the line. If I started on the line now and started chopping, I would end up back past it. I've never been able to figure out how much a little bit is or how to do it consistently. So what I do is I come out about 3/4 of the way from my line to the end of the board. I push my chisel in and twist. How much do I push it in? A little bit, because I don't have to do it consistently. I just have to go in a little, right? So push in, twist, and it snaps off right at my scribe line. And what that does is it creates a little shoulder there that I can now set my chisel against and chop, and I don't walk back past the line. So now I'm going down about halfway. And what's happening is these waste fibers are now binding against that bevel. So the only way I can go deeper, this is the action cut here, this is what severs the waste fibers to remove them. And the only way I can go deeper is to come back out here and remove some of those waste fibers. Maybe. We've got a nice little puncture spot there. And now I can chop down deeper and get down about halfway. So let's take that out of there. Take that out of there. So now I'm down about halfway. And what I'm going to want to do is flip this board. But before I flip it over, I want you to notice that when I went back in and took the waste material out, I left these end fibers intact. That way when I flip it over and I start chopping from this side, that material is supported all the way to my bench. And that way I get maximum penetration out of those chop cuts. I can get this done in no time. And if you've been watching since the beginning, you're probably saying, okay, let's get it done. Right? So again, 3/4 of the way out, push in a little bit and twist. All right, now I've got the little shoulder. I'm going to go to a wider chisel. Right up against my line, chop down. When I chop down, my chisel is slightly past 90 degrees, like 3-4 degrees, that's about it. I actually want it to be a little hollow in the center here so that when I drive the tailboard in, I get a nice tight joint on the inside and the outside, and I don't have to worry about any of that material in the middle causing an open joint. All right, so waste comes out. And now all I have to do is clean that up, and then we're ready to transfer it to the other side of the joint. We'll put it up here in the vise, outside facing me. And that way, what I can do is, usually you only have to clean up in the corners. Hopefully, that's all you have to do. I can see one of these I need to do a little pairing on because I missed my line a little bit. So this one right here, if you take a look, I'm on my pencil line there, and I'm actually drifting away down at this end. So I want to square that line up. And I can pare away at these at this point because I have not transferred them to the other piece. This right now is I'm still making the pattern. So if I take a chisel and I make a slicing cut across there, I sever those fibers, and now I can come back in and just square that line right up. Okay, the other's looking pretty good. This one looks like it needs a little. Why not give it a little extra? Once I transfer this board over to the tail board, I can't touch these again because I've already I've already transferred that pattern over, and if I start paring away at it, it's going to create gaps and open areas because it's no longer the pattern that I use to create the transfer marks, right? So, narrow part of the pin faces the outside of the box. I lay it, stand it up on end. This is what I like about pins first. Gravity works every time we use it. Stand that board right up on end, and I want to make sure that inside surface just covers my scribe line. At that point, I'm going to take my good sharp pencil. If it's not sharp, let's sharpen it up a little.
Show off.
That's my patented sharpening system. If you do that at home, you owe me a quarter. All right, so I got it. I'm going to give gravity a little assist and hold that board right in place. I'm going to reach right into the corner with that good sharp pencil line and transfer those marks. Now, most people pick this board up and they proceed to remove this part, and this part. And when they put it back together, they're going to have a butt joint with holes. So what we do, before you take it off of there, once you've made the transfer, pretend this is hinged, rotate it straight down, and you can see really easily this part has to come out, that part has to come out, that one, and that one, in order for these pins to pass through that board. So now I'll take that tail board, clamp it down in the vise. If I need to, I can take my square and transfer these lines across the top. These on the top edge are only guidelines to help me keep the saw square. You may not need to do this if you have a bunch of dovetails under your belt. These are the lines I want to follow because they are specifically from the board that we created the pins from.
Okay.
Hope I remember which ones are mine. Oh, those.
All right, so you're starting.
So what I'm doing is I'm starting to saw. So here's that first side. I could have sawed anywhere, right? Because that became the pattern. If you look really closely, right there, you're going to see graphite right down the edge of that tail. That's exactly what I'm looking for. If I saw and get rid of the graphite, my dovetails are going to be loose because when I transferred the marks from the pin board over, I used that pencil, and realistically speaking, that line is inside the area that I want to keep by the thickness of my pencil line, so a few thousandths maybe.
Okay.
If I saw it off, I have gaps. If I saw way over here, now I have all that material to pare off, and I lose that registration that I got from setting the pin board into position. Right? So I'm just going to saw them as quickly as I can and still be semi-accurate here. Semi is the key term. All right, so last one, and what I could do is I can go back in and chop all that waste out of there. But these two outside sections, if I chop that off and I undercut like I did on the pins, when I assemble this, I'm going to have this funky triangular gap. So to avoid that, I mean, if you like it, go ahead. But for me, I don't really like it so much. So I'm going to work from the outside in. And what I'm going to do is just saw this off right at the baseline square so that I get a nice, relatively tight joint coming across there. Now, I stopped short of hitting the vertical line, which is now horizontal, so that I didn't saw past it. And you can see there's some fibers sticking up there. So if I take my chisel and make a slicing cut across and then come back in this way, all those extra fibers lift right out of there. Oops. And I have a nice, clean, crisp corner, right? Do the other side. Saw. All right. We'll touch these up. Right there. Got a nice clean corner. Time to chop the last couple of bits of waste out of there. So I'm going to go back to the bench, clamp it down with that inside up. The reason I'm going inside up, I'm going to chop halfway through from this side, flip it over. That's the side that I'm going to see when the joint goes together. And if I drive the chisel all the way through, it blows out on the inside where you don't see it as much. So let's grab that one. Come out about 3/4 of the way to the end. Pop that first layer of fibers out back to my scribe line. Undercut 3/4 degrees. Chop down. Take out a little bit of waste. Flip the board over. Again, I left those end fibers in position so that I have that support all the way down. Think about walking out on the end of a diving board with a hammer and a chisel and trying to chisel off the last inch of the diving board. That's what you would be having happen if you'd taken that material out. It's just going to bounce around. You're not going to get a whole lot of work done in a short period of time. So peel that out, chop out those sections between the tails. I know these are the tails because the angle is on the face of the board, right?
Stubborn one.
Yeah. It's the snodgrass tail.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm working from the outside in. I'm going to slice across there and take those fibers out in the corner. The reason I work from the outside in is if I get overzealous and I start doing this, it blows out inside where you are least likely to see it. That was on purpose.
Yeah.
That one wasn't, but yes. All right, let's make sure I don't have any. I had a little bit of these fibers sticking up on this end. So I think I want to take a wide chisel, go right into my scribe line here, and just sort of wiggle it, go about halfway across, and then come in from the other side, put it right into the scribe line, wiggle it, and just clean that little bit that was sticking up there. Oh, now we have the hard part here. All right, so this lines up just like this. Get everything set. Maybe. And this is the most important part of dovetailing. You know what it is? No, it's not hammer, it's pray. There's little snug. And I'm also going at it very slowly. That one was a little tight. Out here, you can see I've got a tiny little gap there. And if I turn it around, you can see I cracked because this one looks like I'm slightly out of square.
On watching Chuck do this, you can see more at No BS Woodworking over on his YouTube channel. Of course, we're going to put this up on Bandsaw Life YouTube channel as well. And if you want to come to either of our classes, I teach down or up in Pennsylvania at Acanthus Workshop, and Chuck is talking about coming to the school here once we get it open. So everybody that watched, thank you very much for watching, and join us again. And don't forget, go over to bandsawlife.com or No BS woodworking?
Acanthus.com.
Acanthus.com. See, I knew I'd get something.